Mythical Pokemon. Mythical Pokemon are some of the coolest Pokemon to ever get released. And in Pokemon Go, they're, let's just say, a little bit obscure. More or less, they're definitely the hardest Pokemon to get in your account, as most of the times, Mythicals are relegated to only one per person. Yes, there are indeed some exceptions to this rule, but that's mainly how it is. The most recent Mythical that was released is Volcanion. And personally, I really enjoyed Volcanion's release in Pokemon Go. So in today's video, we'll be ranking the release of every single mythical Pokemon in Pokemon Go, from worst to best. So without further ado, let's get into today's video. Alright then, so to start off this tier list, all I have to say is that there's only one Pokemon that I think belongs in the F tier. And that Pokemon definitely has to be Keldeo. Now Keldeo is a pretty cool mythical Pokemon, but not only is its first release its only release in Pokemon Go, it was locked behind a paywall. So just because its first release was not only pretty mid, as it was released in a pretty random event during December that was based around fighting type Pokemon and swords and stuff, it was also a paid release where it was locked behind a paywall. Unlike mythicals like Zarude, where their first ever release in the game of Pokemon Go, anybody could get one because it was completely free. Okay then, now let's move on to C tier. First things first, let's address the elephant in the room. Why did I skip D tier? Because I feel like none of these Pokemon's release besides Keldeo are so bad that they belong in D tier. So now let's go over to C tier. And C tier holds Darkrai, Hoopa Unbound, and Celebi. So these are all Pokemon that I feel like only got some pretty mid releases. Celebi, first of all, was a GoFest release, but it wasn't really anything special. It didn't have a special encounter gimmick besides teleporting, and you could say it was technically copying Mew in that sense, with its appearing and disappearing. And also we had Hoopa Unbound and Darkrai, who I feel like just had raid releases that were very basic. They didn't even get dropped in research and then in raids. And I guess you can make the argument Hoopa Unbound was dropped in research, but no, actually the normal Hoopa was dropped in research, not Hoopa Unbound. When you claim that research, you get a normal Hoopa, not a Hoopa Unbound. Alright then, now let's move on to the B tier. The B tier is going to consist of mythical Pokemon where I thought that their release was actually pretty unique for the time, and Pokemon that I technically think just had releases that I just genuinely wasn't expecting. Starting the B tier has got to be Deoxys, Genesect, and Hoopa, alongside Jirachi, Victini, Meloetta, Shaman, and Volcanion, the newest mythical. Now this one's going to take a minute to explain. Starting off with Deoxys. Deoxys was one of the rare occasions where a Pokemon was released in EX raids, a removed feature where it's technically like an invitation that you would get to participate in a 5-star raid, alongside Mewtwo, which was also in EX raids. Genesect was released in a research, alongside Hoopa. So personally, I feel like their releases were very special, because when they were dropped, it was actually a big deal in the game, because they were dropped in research. So back then, people thought that they could only get one. But now, Hoopa Unbound has made normal Hoopa extremely easy to get. All you have to do is revert its form. But we are counting the first release, and the normal Hoopa was first released through a research. Not to mention, the same goes for Genesect. Although literally, I'm pretty sure a month later, during April, they actually released the first Genesect drive in raids. So that was weird. And now for Jirachi, Victini, Meloetta, Shaman, and Volcanion. Do you realize something that all these Pokemon have in common? Yes, they were all released during their own GoFest events. Jirachi is mainly here because it was the first Pokemon to feature a special animation during GoFest. And then Victini is here because it was, released the GoFest after, I'm pretty sure. It was the first mythical to be released in a Pokemon GoFest global. So yeah, that makes it pretty cool. And then Meloetta was the first mythical to be released with a special encounter screen. And then, Shaman and Volcanion are here because they also had a special encounter screen. Now, do I think these releases were anything special? Not anymore. Before, like a few years back, probably, I'd say a mythical that was released during a Pokemon Go Fest is indeed pretty special. But to be real with you, it's just not really that cool anymore. Because every single mythical now has a special encounter screen. And yeah, they kind of just lost what made them so special. But now it's time for us to move on to the... Alrighty then, now let's move on to the A tier. The A tier has definitely got to be the tier I'm the most excited to talk about, because there are some Pokemon in here that, honestly, when they dropped in Pokemon Go, I was genuinely excited to get them and use them. So we're going to start this tier off with Meltan, Deontay, and Mew. Alright then, so that is going to be it for the A tier. And honestly, I'm not going to lie to you, the thing about these Pokemon is that all of them came with something extra alongside their release. Meltan's release was very interesting because nobody knew what it was by the time it dropped. I'm pretty sure it was dropped in like either a research or something, or it was dropped during an event. I know that it was alongside Ditto, and there were also teasing Kecleon with the event as well, but it never got dropped. But the thing about Meltan is that when it appeared in Pokemon Go, as a community, we all did not know what Meltan was. We all had no idea, how to get Meltan and stuff, what it was, if it was even a Pokemon. So just due to how mysterious it was at the time, it made the release of Meltan extremely intriguing, because not only would we get the release of Meltan, it was also the release of a new Pokemon, and was also the release of information on what this new Pokemon even is. And Deontay. Deontay is the first Pokemon that is a mythical to be released alongside a Mega Evolution. So not only did you get a Deontay, you got yourself a Mega Deontay, which is absolutely insane. Not to mention that Mega Deontay is also meta relevant. So it's technically one of the first instances where a mythical not only covers the Dex entry part where you can literally only get one, it also technically covers the whole part of being meta relevant, having a mega evolution and stuff, being able to be used during special events to boost candy gain. It's just overall the most meta relevant, well, probably the most meta relevant mythical Pokemon. And then Mew. Mew was the first mythical Pokemon to get released in Pokemon Go. And that overall makes it a pretty cool drop. It was the first mythical. And I would put it in S tier if it wasn't for this next Pokemon. Okay then, what is the mythical Pokemon that I feel had the best release in Pokemon Go? It's Zarude. It's gotta be Zarude. Zarude was first released for free in Pokemon Go during Halloween time. And that was pretty cool, but it ended up coming back paid. And that's what I feel like every single mythical should do. It should be dropped free first and then come back paid. Honestly, the only reason it's getting S tier is because it's technically Keldeo done perfectly. It was released free, it's a good Pokemon, it's actually very meta relevant, and everybody had a chance to get one at some point. But I guess now you don't. But still, either ways, Zarude is a mythical that only comes around every once in a while. It makes it so that its release is always special. So the next time it comes back, Zarude is definitely going to be extremely special. But with that, it's going to be the end of today's video. Peace and have an amazing rest of your day.